part, and I'm like, this is your gift.
Yes, yeah, pretty much.
Hey, good morning, everyone. It is June 17th, 2024. It's our 9 o'clock strategic planning meeting. Let the record reflect that all 5 commissioners are present. Commissioner Jordan and Commissioner Punter on Zoom. The rest of us are in the conference room. And just a belated happy Father's Day to all the fathers in the room. I know Chris is a new father. Happy Father's Day, your first one. So just want to say that to everybody. Hope everybody was well taken care of by their families yesterday. All the fun things that everyone gets to do. So with that though, we've got a busy agenda this morning. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So Gil, I'll let you start.
Good morning, commissioners. I'm here today to kind of go over House Bill 1257, the investment grade audit. There were a couple items in there that we added back into the presentation. So some of the first part of this, I'll be doing kind of a recap of items that we originally had in there, and then some new items that we've added in. On the next slide. This is just kind of the workup of the House Bill 1257. And we were to provide a detailed audit of our utility power usage on all county buildings over 50,000 square feet. These were the tier 1 buildings. And just bearing in mind that this is kind of the first phase of the Clean Buildings Act. Next phase, they'll be in the tier 2, they'll be going into the 20 to 50,000 square foot buildings. The idea on these is to provide a plan of changes the county can make that will allow us to meet our EUI targets. These are the energy intensity unit or energy use intensity targets. So basically they take a current usage snapshot and they have set a formula that is rated to where your building should actually be to meet the Green Buildings Act. So they see that it meets that target, and where we're at is some of our buildings do not meet that target. So we're going to explain a little bit what we can do in order to make those targets. Register our buildings with the Department of Commerce. We've already done that, and we are actually recording data right now. Discuss all alternates to replacing fossil fuel technology. I'm going to really just go over real quick. These were the items and that we actually, the different methods to actually eliminate fossil fuels, but we'll show you the reasons why we can't. And then review the new project scope and priorities. Discuss the alternates to value engineer added solutions, water conservation, lighting. Those are things that we'll be able to add and monitor with some of the new upgrades that we are looking at doing. Timeline for completion to begin the measurement reporting. We need to be measuring by June of 2026 for the courthouse, adult detention and public safety, because they fit that the 90 to 220, and then June of 27 for the juvenile detention and the public works. And then we'll discuss FIMs, the facility improvement measures. Next slide. So as I reviewed last time, geothermal, we evaluated geothermal, requires about 800,000 square feet of land to install geothermal wells. That's approximately 14 football fields. So, and that's just property down here that we just, surrounding property we just don't have. Electric resistance. The way, let me go a little bit into the plan that we've come up with may potentially work with electric resistance, but that wouldn't be for some time. There really isn't the infrastructure in this, down in this area of town. Right now we are using about 2.6 megawatts we would need 7 bank lots of utility power. Heat pump farms, again, they work with geothermal. We just don't have that type of property in order to use that. And then solar is the same. There's not enough space to install. Next slide. So I just wanted to kind of take a quick snapshot, and I believe that these have already changed again. But this is just today's snapshot of where we are for cost for natural gas and cost for electrical per MMBTU. So right now, those are the cost measures, the actual costs that we are paying as of right now. And like I said, I believe that they've already changed again. Next slide. So these are our EUI targets. This kind of gives you an idea. So I want to touch a little bit on this slide real quick and kind of go over again that. So the way that the Department of Commerce set up the Clean Buildings Act, they did amend it here last year. And when we originally started the project, it was they had set a EUI target calculation to hit originally. And then when they went in and amended it, they amended it to hours of operation. So what we found is we were sitting okay. We had a few that we needed to make some changes on, but then once we looked at the hours of operation, that's where it really got dark for us. And I guess those are the 2 areas that I really want to touch on. It's the limit set for those buildings, and especially for the public safety building and for the jail. Those are 2 buildings that if we weren't able to be a centralized meter and bring those in, it would cost a lot for those buildings to actually operate under the Green Bill Act. They are 24/7 operation, and the jail itself was originally designed for 460 inmates. So trying to keep them in the environmental control standards of kind of a happy environment, we're just not able to do that without pumping a lot of energy into that. So that's why those 2 buildings, especially, they are really utility driven. Next slide. Again, these are the benefits. What we've come up with is a centralized hydronic plant. We already have the steam plant. We would just convert it from high pressure steam to centralized hydronic, which is hot water. So we'd be trading the 2 for much more efficient units that match ASHRAE standards, and they can be installed here. The beauty of this plan is that if infrastructure for electrical down the road were to change, it would be a fairly simple modification to remove the centralized natural gas units and replace them with electrical. So, but that would be down the road sometime. We don't know what the timetable is of that. So for centralized hydronics, it meets all the requirements for House Bill 1257. Reduction in energy consumption, so savings, reduction in greenhouse gases. We get to replace some outdated equipment that is coming due for major factory rebuilds. Reliability of the new equipment. It gives us the ability to diversify our mechanical workforce. We are still under the high pressure steam city code for stationary engineers. This would give us the ability to down the road to actually hire folks that are really more suited for full building maintenance. It'll all be automated. So under that side, they would be able to respond on a Saturday night out at the small arms range if something were to occur. It really broadens our flexibility. And if we add more buildings, down the road will actually be able to handle that. So again, down at the bottom there, it meets this actually meets the requirements of House Bill 1257 and the Green Buildings Act. I think I double pasted the actual savings. Next slide. And you can see again, just to recap, our campus, an overview on that. With the centralized hydronic, we would use the same tunnel routes, just some minor changes. And with this, we would run a centralized domestic hot water system. So we would be able to, all that, right now for the public safety building, all that energy we send there for that hot water system and high pressure steam, we would be making that right at our plant and actually pumping it down there. So we're pretty much the same, few minor changes to that where we would need to place some more grids, maybe some more tunnel work. Next slide. These are really for the centralized hydronic and domestic hot water. These are the pros. It's the best option to meet our EUI standard. Improve central plant reliability, decrease downtime potential, saves anywhere from 6 to 10 million over a 20-year lifespan, avoids repeat state clean buildings audit, which has to be repeated every 5 years unless you're already in compliance. Provides a means to track and report energy usage to the state. Our new system that we're looking at on this will actually record energy real time. So we can actually set energy limits and warnings to the system. So if we have a system that's stuck in full load capacity, we'll actually be able to research that, troubleshoot it, and find out what's going on. This system and the way that we're looking at it, it actually, on the centralized hydronic side, it'll actually be like today's state of the art. So we'll actually be able to take a really good look at real time what our energy is actually. Next slide. Again, we put that in there. As we talk about our options for these changes, we have the centralized hydronic gets us to meet the EUI standards, but we also looked at some of the aging infrastructure. And as we went forward and did our study, we found that the switchgear, not only in the public safety building, the courthouse, and the adult detention building, not only are they running at max capacity, but they are breaking down. They are showing, heat load, stress. So as we did this engineering study, we also took a look at what it would take to actually replace these as part of this study. These are, not your average switchgear units. They're also being at a maxed out. We have no potential for any further growth within these buildings, especially these three. So the idea would be is if we added these onto the project and swapped them out, we would actually add a little bit of capacity for these buildings. Next slide. So meeting the EUI requirement with critical infrastructure upgrades, what we're looking at is for the campus EUI targets, our target on a centralized meter is 92.5 for all 5 of the buildings. Future EUI targets after modifications would be 83.29. This is our recommended with the infrastructure changes, but it'll come at an approximate cost of 33 to 36 million. The items include converting the steam plant to hydronic and domestic hot water plant, optimization of Metasys controls, and new coil valving for all heating coils. heat recovery for domestic hot water. And then these items that are listed in blue are the electrical switchgear replacements for the courthouse, public safety building, adult detention building, interior lighting, selected air handler systems. We only targeted the ones that are over 45 years old. These are units that we no longer can get spare parts for. If they break down, the air handling system's down until we figure out a Band-Aid method to get it back operational again. And then chiller plant mechanical upgrades. As we looked at previously, I put money in the budget for a new cooling tower. We think that money could be better spent actually looking at the way the system operates, potentially putting more meters on it, getting it to maybe a little bit larger delta T on it. We're sending out such cold, chill water throughout the plant, but the return water is still fairly cold. So I think we're looking at a better exchange on that. Next slide. And this would be just to meet the EUI requirements of 92.5. EUIs after modifications would get us there. That's the 89.6. And this would become at 23 to 26 million. But that's converting the steam plant over to centralized. And that's all you get with that. Next slide. Funding discussion, Randy, Tessa, help.
We have a couple of ways that we would recommend paying for either option 1 or option 2. The first would be for the county to issue GO bonds. There would be some payments we would have to make this year. We would, we would sign documents if we're going to issue bonds, saying that we can reimburse ourselves for those costs that we have to pre-fund. We would use current fund balance and cash to get through that. We would then issue bonds and pay ourselves back. Or Johnson Controls would love to do a lease with us where, they pay for everything. They would charge us about 4.5% interest over a period of time. So it's either us issuing bonds or they would take the debt themselves. But those would be the two suggestions that, the third option, of course, would be to use fund balance. But with, I think looking at the 5-year forecast, that is probably one I wouldn't recommend. Of the 3 options, these are the 2 that I think we should look at.
Next slide.
Can Simmons be paid for out of REIT $1?
It could be, but our REIT 1 balance is getting and
Leveraged.
it's being heavily leveraged, but I don't know if the historical preservation or any changes to this building could be covered by historical preservation tax potentially. I know we have a balance, forgot what it was, but I know we have a balance in that account. So that's the car rental. Is that which is that? Or store?
Historic preservation, yeah, 143.
143, right. You have left balances in there, like if we need some fascia repairs to the courthouse, things like that. I guess we'd have to look to see if we could make internal investments to this building. But that could potentially pay for some.
So this slide here for the option 1, as Commissioner Keeney asked for at the last meeting, this would be the payout schedule.
But we can use a REIT fund also. REIT fund disqualified.
We just gotta look at
We just have to look at all the others.
what's left in there.
Exactly. And we did do some work on that late last week, so just need to test it.
There you go. Okay. Yeah, I think, yeah, when you have that, just send it out.
Right, instead of having that just sitting there, we could use that, but I know we have other requests
Right.
for that money also outstanding.
As well as lots of requests for our fund balance and all of that
Yes.
as well. So at some point, we've got to be looking at it
Yep.
again.
And
All that
that
holistically
that
instead of
could be
just
the third option where we look at some of those special revenue funds and maybe some fund balance to meet that delta. It's just looking at our 5-year forecast, we have to be careful. with fund balance.
Okay, next slide.
Yeah, so in terms of next steps, this is about a 30-month effort. And in order to kind of meet the timeline, we're looking to achieve approval to proceed with the board so that we can begin contracting. We've already examined a rough draft of the contract. We've got legal engaged in that, and we're hoping to, be able to proceed with that over the next month so that we can move into contract execution by late July or early August and issue a notice to proceed to JCI. So timing is important here. Just looking for decisions.
You go first.
I was just gonna say, I would add, if leasing is not an option, we can figure out the funding as we go, how much is fund balance, how much is special revenue fund, how much is additional GO bonding. We don't have to have that decision today, but as we go down to the contracts, I guess we should decide if we're doing it internally, if we're gonna do JCI funding, because that'll be part of the contract, so. Doesn't have to be today, but I just maybe we got a short window.
Well, I mean, I don't think we can make a decision today.
No.
So, but yeah, it's a lot to think about with 35 or more million.
Yes, you have your one photo that shows, some of our equipment was put in near 50 years ago. What's the useful life of the equipment that's going in? How long can we expect that to last before it's deemed essentially obsolete and will be in the county will be having the conversation to replace what'll be put in? And the reason, because you have your projection of your 20-year cost savings being between 6 and 10. It's gonna cost over 30 million. I mean, is it gonna last 60 years to where in 60 years we'll recover, that 30 million, or 60 years from now, that stuff's gonna be 20 years junked and new stuff put in its place?
Well, I think for the switchgear side of it, one, it's the environmental conditions. The environmental conditions on most of this equipment really wasn't there. We actually, for the jail, that one was breaking down at such a fast rate that we jumped in and we put environmental controls. We put a ductless split system in there to keep the room fairly cool, because it was running at such a high temperature. I think as long as we have in this project engineered those in, to make sure that we have those environmental controls in place, and then treatment on the domestic side, for hot water and for the centralized hydronic, there's no reason why we can't get 40 to 50 years easy out of this.
Okay.
So, we've done a really good job. Even our boiler steam plant that we have right now, we've maintained that at a very high level. We're just kind of getting to that level where we have quite a few patches on the refractory on the doors, and they're getting to that level where they probably would need some type of rebuild. Unfortunately, because of the size of them, it's the cost to actually get the doors removed, get them shipped across the country, get them redone. So, but to answer your question, I believe that as long as we monitor it, we should have them for at least 50 years.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Yep.
Does the manufacturer estimate that they can? I'm not saying it's an issue of sort of our staff's ability.
Yeah.
are they built to last 50 years? I mean, that's the thing. I mean, the old say, they don't build them like they used to,
Yeah.
kind of thing. I mean, you've got stuff over there that was built high quality. I mean,
Yeah,
seems people took more pride in the, you know, in the factories when they built those things. I mean, is this machinery built in a way that it can last
it's
that long? Are you
it's
confident that it could?
yeah, it's a lot
Okay.
similar to that, and it doesn't
Okay.
run at as high temperatures as our central steam.
Okay,
So I mean, we're just boiling water.
okay,
So our steam systems that we have now for our high pressure steam, we're sending steam out at 125 PSI throughout the county.
Mhm.
So everything that we have on that system runs it runs a lot more energy. The projections, especially on the option, the recommended option for that, we'll see with the natural gas, so that's the centralized hydronic itself, we'll see a 28% reduction in natural gas usage. So that alone right there tells you that we're not running it at as high of a temperature.
okay.
I just wanted to add that some of the equipment that we're looking at, the major, larger equipment such as boilers and gear will have that life expectancy, but there are plenty of other items such as controls and upgrades that we're looking to do that are necessary with what we're, scoped to do. So some of that will need to be updated throughout the years as well. So not everything will have that 50-year, but there are other components that have a shorter lifespan, but for the bigger hitters like that, I'm with Gil on.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Commissioner French, you raised your hand first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The difference between this program and what we did in the last 8 to 10 years with the ECOS program. With the ECOS program, the contractor had to guarantee a return on investment. There had to be performance criteria that would demonstrate that you were actually going to save electricity, you were actually going to save energy. And that came with guarantees. The trouble I have with this program, and I had it when we debated it on the Building Code Council and continue to, is that this is a investment program that does not have any criteria for a return on investment. And so we are just investing dollars to achieve a philosophical position with regard to energy. And I just, we ought to be better stewards of taxpayer dollars than to chase this kind of an agenda. I'll end up having to support it because we don't have any other choice, but it is not good spending of taxpayer dollars. And I really feel that our taxpayers are going to get the raw end of this deal. And that's unfortunate. Those are dollars that we could spend better in other areas to serve the taxpayers as opposed to chasing this philosophical political agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Jordan.
I'm just going to ask Gil if you could expand on what is included in that kind of cost saving number. And I'm wondering if the cost of maintenance on the current system, some of which you alluded to, is part of that or not.
It is. So with the new centralized hydronic system and, it's new equipment, we actually will be able to see quite a bit of a savings for our amount of time that we're actually working on this equipment maintenance wise. Again, we gain back that time with those technicians to perform preventative maintenance, to do more things around the campus. But yes, it actually does reflect that maintenance savings.
Couple of observations. We went through this, I believe Gil mentioned this earlier, but the way our campus is set up right now with the 24/7 operations of jail and for the public safety building. Those, I think it's fair to say this, Gail, those buildings on their own, nothing can be done individually to make them get in compliance with these EUI targets.
Right.
They have to be done as a campus-wide effort. If it was individual buildings by buildings, they would never do it. We have too much loading of individuals in the jail because we're overcrowded. That creates issues with trying to manage the heating and cooling in there. Public safety building also was not built with the ability to meet those targets as well. So those are just some things to be aware of in this. And then Gil, the electrical upgrades that are needed would be needed to be done separate from the Clean Buildings Act.
Yeah.
Those are things that are on last legs. They've served their time. You saw some of them are 70 years old, 50 years old. Those, we have risks of failure in the courthouse here because of the lack of that switchgear being so old. So in a sense, that is an investment that would need to be made regardless. If 1257 never came across, we'd still be having the conversation. Gil would be talking about the need to replace that switchgear. The third thing I would say is keep in mind there are other tenants in our buildings. City of Spokane is in the public safety building. They have their municipal court in there. They have their probation. They have their law enforcement there. They will have to be part of this cost discussion because we have a shared M&O. While the county owns a public safety building, we have a shared M&O expense in there, and this will clearly be in the category of M&O. So some of these capital funds will be required to be contributed by the city as well as part of their M&O costs, and that will depend upon the percentage of the investments that are specifically targeted towards the buildings and their relative cost share. Same with the courthouse annex, municipal courtrooms are in there as well. So, and then there'll be some things with the city of the Valley with our law enforcement contract will also be recaptured through their percentage share, percentage use and charges that we have with the public safety building. And then the detention facility will all be dependent upon what the average daily population is for their misdemeanors. So a lot of moving parts, not going to come all on the back of the county, but there is a significant portion of it that will.
Yeah, I didn't touch enough or emphasize the importance of those switch gears. Those units right now, if they go down, if we have one go down in the building and we cannot get it back to reclose position, which a lot of these over time, they were never set up on any type of proper preventative maintenance to actually exercise them, inspect them, have them tested. They were just turned to the on position and left in that position. But the downfall to that is if we can't get it back to the closed position, we saw recently on the SAR project, even pushing that, it was still like 16 to 18 months to get a new switchgear. So once we place the order for a lot of these larger buildings, that is to get the industrial size switchgear that we need. That's like the last component because the lead time on them can be anywhere from 16 to 20 months. So if one were to go down, we would have to come up with an emergency plan to figure out how to get power. It's not that it's impossible. I've done it before, but it's not the best place to be in.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask a couple of questions. So on option one, when we talk about it, you know, if we're talking about the electrical is something that we have to do, it's not part of the Clean Buildings Act. So I guess for me, it'd be helpful to know kind of that 33 million to 36 million. What is the stuff that we have to do just because we have to do it for those purposes versus what's the part that's a Clean Buildings Act that's requiring us to do some of that? Because, you know, just because I think as we look to the legislature for the future to really be able to identify what are we doing so we have to do it for our own needs versus what what the requirement from the state is, because I think that helps the citizens to understand.
Yeah.
What the legislature is placing upon us versus what we just have to do, because it's a 45-year plus, unit that's aging.
Right.
So I think for me, that's part of the breakdown that we need to have, because I think that helps us go talk to the citizens of, we are here to be good stewards of the assets that we have. These buildings are the assets that we have that we are interested to protect, to continue to make sure that they are functional in the future. Which is what I see the electrical and that being part of versus what the Clean Energy Act is requiring us to do. That is again being placed upon us by the state. And I think Al kind of talked about that as he has seen it come down through the Building Codes Council. And so I think for me, that's part of what I need to know to be able to explain to the public what is happening, what is going on. Because again, we do have to be good stewards of the assets that we have. And I want to make sure we're doing that. And then I think the other thing for me too is as we move forward is we have made some improvements already. I mean, taking a tour of the tunnels underneath the buildings and stuff, seeing some of the improvements that we've already made. I think we need to be talking about that too. As we, Martha, this may be part of our communication plan with this. As what we've already done to be more efficient. And all of that. So here on campus, for the buildings, because, going out touring the small arms range, and seeing the new stuff out there and how efficient it is. I mean, it's important for us to have that because we all want to be good stewards of the electricity that is coming in, because it does take, it is part of the climate change of all that. And so we are already trying to be good stewards. But going beyond is a cost to the citizens that is excessive, but we're gonna have to do it. So I think for me to try to help, be able to talk about all of that as a good communication strategy as well. And still trying to figure out how are we gonna really pay for this? I mean, this is a lot of money. Commissioner French, I know you're there, just a second, so go ahead.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I want to piggyback a little bit on the direction that Commissioner Kearns was heading with regard to the life expectancy of some of these improvements. I know that when I was on the Building Code Council, they were using a 50-year life expectancy for life cycle costing. And I could not find anywhere, either the west side or the east side of the state, a reputable economist that would say you can do life cycle costing beyond 5 years. And even that's more of a swag than it is an actual projection and stuff. So as we look at these things, and I'll just use an example, in the early 2000s, T8's fluorescent lights were the big energy saver of the decade until we created LEDs. And then buildings across this country, and I know that a couple of buildings that I own, we ended up having to go back and replacing all of our fluorescent T8s with LEDs. It had a significant savings, but it had a savings that we could achieve within 8 to 10 years, not 50 years and stuff. So I just, when we're representing that, we're going to be able to see any savings, let's be realistic about the timetable. So many things will change in 50 years that to project out that far is just unrealistic and misleading. Just observations based upon history at the Building Code Council and quite frankly, the Department of Commerce. The Department of Commerce was the one that was pushing the 50-year life cycle cost, even though nobody in the industry supported it. Thank you.
To go back to your question, so the option 1 and the option 2, essentially what you're getting with that is the option 1 is actually that is getting us to the EUI standards at a cost of 23 to 26 million. We took the option 2 we took that opportunity to identify these other units at an extra cost of about 10 million. We have a full calculator that we had built as part of this project. So we could actually kind of go in there a la carte and add these items. We just took and added on the 10 million, we added the items that we think potentially we will see a failure and it will come at a great cost. And that was the reason why we targeted those and we leveraged the actual audit. So we could actually have the engineers take a look at that equipment also. As on the lighting side of it, even though we projected a savings on that, the lighting package was for us to really work. It was for the county to actually buy that through Vista, get the rebate savings on it, and then the county, our department would actually do the installation. We only left that amount in to purchase it. We don't want to pay the money to have somebody else install it so we can actually see additional savings that we calculated. Otherwise, what we had looked at by throwing in lighting could have potentially took it up another 2-3 million. So we actually took it upon ourselves to engineer a solution on that using county resources. I can tell you, looking at the calculator that we built as part of this project, there was a lot to it. I mean, there's a lot more to it than I could even imagine. That, as we went through these, we put a lot of miles on up and down stairs and mechanical spaces to look at some of this stuff. But again, we looked at the equipment that could potentially fail, that you would see a complete stoppage in the courthouse, public safety building and the jail.
So on that slide where you say save 6 to 10 million, that's total over 20 years. Right, okay. So, and that's not built into, that's separate from the cost. You haven't built that into that's potential savings.
Right.
But the costs are separate from that.
Yes.
Okay. And then, so when you're talking about that, so like the option 1, option 2, are you thinking then that those units that you'd like to upgrade, but they're not required that we
Right.
do it now, at what point will those potentially be, will the county have to look at updating those?
Well, right now where we're at,
I see how you're packaging
Yeah.
it to think ahead.
Yeah.
But will that be a cost down the road, and will it be more expensive if it's not part of this package? I guess I'm just trying to weigh. I hear what everyone is saying. This is a big price tag.
oh yeah,
And it's gonna be, a challenge to figure out how this all comes together. I like that you looked at, all of the infrastructure that you could do. And then you gave us an option of, okay, if you just did the, switching from in the steam plant. What could that look like for us though? Like those electrical units in 10 years, 15 years? Like what are we thinking those would have to be updated anyway?
So I mean, it was the maintaining of that, which I cannot speak for prior to coming on board. But the environmental conditions and the load capacities that were on those units, they are maxed out. Usually you try to keep it under an 80%. It usually keeps the unit cool. It keeps it managed. It actually doesn't start breaking down internally. Some of these units are well over the 80%. And they are breaking down. Problem is, at the age they are right now, there are no spares. So as it does start breaking down, if we have, whether it be the entire switch or individual buckets, we may not be able to rebuild those buckets. At that time, we will have to come up with a plan on how to get that unit back operational. And it'll be the downtime for those facilities and how we work around it that we're more concerned about. Cause we're kind of in that. We just don't want to be in that situation where now we're coming to you and saying, it's down, what do we do? Because, I mean, we're, you know, in that industry, on the electrical side of it, I mean, we're immediately, you know, getting our electrical engineer involved, from our on-call service and coming up with a plan with them. That's probably the fastest route we could go. But the idea is that once the actual full unit goes down the main switches, then it's down if they don't go back closed.
So of those 4 in blue, those 4 bullets, the switchgear replacements, the lighting, the air handler and the chiller plant, are any of those, do all 4 of those have to go together or are those choices?
They're just choices. This was, again, we leveraged the audit that we did with our engineers. We leveraged it by researching what it would take to replace these pieces of equipment as part of the contract.
We went in with the mentality of not just going with the house build because we all know it wasn't our idea, but just from Gil and I have both been here for about 9 years and all the equipment that we've analyzed and been seeing.
Right.
That's the mentality how we went into this, finding the most critical components that are, you know, we're kind of getting 2 birds with 1 stone where we just don't go with caulking and silicone and lighting, but we went in for the infrastructure items. And real quick on the switchgear, like the Fort House one, 1975, we're right at that 50-year mark. And that's kind of what we expect.
So that would be on your list of
Right.
capital needs anyway.
Yes.
Okay.
And to add a little bit, when they installed that, we didn't have the server farms, the air conditioning needs and things of that nature back then. So we're seeing a drastically higher load on this equipment that we're having to manage and do the best that we can.
And that really speaks for even on that side of them wanting to just eliminate fossil fuels and go in electrical completely. We definitely don't have the infrastructure for that. And that would be a major lift to get us to that over 7 megawatts. So we definitely, it's just things to look for planning for the future. And that's why we leverage this chance to really put that out there for the commissioners.
I would add one other point. I mean, they're already mobilized doing the core UIT effort. So it's going to be cheaper to have them tackle these 4 additional points now versus later. Today's dollars are less expensive than tomorrow's dollars. So now's the time to do it if
Well, and I'd say in the future, if we have a failure, I mean, it's coming out of fund balance because we have no
Right.
money to do it, which is not. Then we're doing it on an emergency basis and all of that and.
Yeah.
It's not, we won't have a choice because we can't be down electrically.
Yeah.
Here, otherwise, basically shut down the county.
The contractors are willing to kind of extend out the work scope for items that are not part of this project. I know Ken mentioned 30 months, but some of those items could be done after the fact. So that may look a little bit different on the funds being distributed. That could be a potential as well.
Yeah, we looked at.
You get a price point up front, but then the
Yes.
work's done later. Okay.
And again, that's like with the switchgear side of it, sizing the proper switchgear here, but then ordering it. We don't know how long that's gonna take. We haven't been given that estimated delivery time. So we definitely would want to make absolutely sure that once the order's placed, we have a really good projected installation time that we can make that. So even while we're doing this, we're still looking 3 years down the road to switch those over. So it's that really jumping in now to be prepared for anything that could potentially happen.
And this is an energy savings contract.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I understood correctly, but there are guaranteed savings with this. So the contractor is guaranteeing them. I know we can't be looking at that, but I know they're not gonna overextend their guarantee, so there is a potential we may see greater savings than what they guarantee. So it's just a thought from mine.
I just have one more question for Randy on the bonding side. So that, the number you put in there was the current like lowest interest rate go bond that you see here. Sorry, where were we?
4.5.
That's.
Typically lowest. Well, it said, what it's COFs around 3.75%.
Cost of financing.
Cost of financing, right?
I think that's under the lease.
No, that's under the go. bond.
Lease is 4.5 and you've got geo bonds 3.75.
Yeah. Does that sound,
That's just a current,
it'll go up.
they're going down right now.
And that's like the lowest rate that potentially we could get.
Again, rates go based upon a term. And our rating is good right now, but the term also will determine what the rate is gonna
Right.
be, so. Maybe we could go 20-year, you could go 30-year, go 10-year, then you're gonna get different rate points.
And like we talked about earlier, you mentioned, when we met with the Department of Commerce, and we've had many meetings with them to speak about all the improvements that we've done. Nothing counts before the bill was signed. So there's no way for us to quantify an energy savings. We can't reel back, to 2016 and look at when we replaced the LED lights in the jail and things of that. We can't use that measurement.
See, and that's part of what we need to really be talking about, to say, can we, I mean, that doesn't cost the legislature any money to allow us to use that as part of us
Yes.
showing what we've already done and the improvements we've already made. To try to get them to soften their arbitrary date. To allow for, again, rewarding good behavior of
Yeah.
people that have already been trying to look back and go, be good stewards. So, I mean, is that something that we can talk to the legislature about, to open up, how much would that help us? To show that we've already been doing these things to make improvements. That doesn't cost them any money to do that, but then it eases the burden on the taxpayers, because it's all the taxpayers that are
Yeah.
having to be, burdened with this.
No, I totally agree. We had multiple meetings with Mike and we explained to him what we felt the pitfalls were of doing this. We wanted to be able to utilize the energy work that we've done since that. And I think he's pushed it as far as he can. But again, I think that it gets the closer we get to the deadline, we're hoping that maybe that conversation will be reopened again. But that's, I mean, on my side of it was to go give you the information. And that's kind of where we're at.
And quite frankly, I'm more concerned about the electrical stuff, because if we do have a failure, and
Yeah.
we pretty much know we will.
Yeah.
At some point, that's gonna be more devastating to our citizens and the county. Financially, all of that, than the other, so meeting a deadline that is put upon us by the state. So I'm very concerned about that. It was interesting just being back in Ohio. It was for a cybersecurity attack, but I mean, Cleveland's letting you call it, was closed for over a week.
Wow.
Because of a cybersecurity attack, so whether it's electrical or something like that, I mean, it's just those kinds of things that happen that then have this huge effect. And, for them, it'll cost them more money to do security in the future, and all of that, which we're already doing those things. But I think we have to, again, as good stewards of our assets, we have to be continually thinking about those things that we need to be making sure are running efficiently and well.
are we confident that? Yeah, or I don't know, maybe, is there any new technology that's sort of on the horizon that is, I mean, in the next couple of year, I mean, I know we're up against a tight timeline on where we have to hit, but I mean, is there new technology that's 3-5 years out that is better than what we're looking at here?
You know, I can't predict what the cost of energy is gonna be for difference between natural gas and electrical.
Okay.
We did look at in the way that they engineered this, that we can easily modify that at a reduced cost
Okay,
if that technology becomes available.
okay,
The idea is that we would convert everything hydronic, and as new technologies, more efficient technologies come along, those could easily be put in place at a much reduced cost.
okay. And then I know you touched on it in one of the previous meetings. What's the structure as far as fines if we don't meet the standards?
You got that slide?
Yeah, it's $1 a square foot annually
Okay.
plus $5,000. So you're looking at approximately $700,000 a year. if you don't
Okay.
comply.
Every other year.
Real quick on the natural gas. Why we keep going back to that, is there's obviously other technology like you mentioned, and we may have other, utilities available. Our winters, as you know, here, we have backup generators. And right now, if we lose power, we're able to sustain our critical equipment during those outages with minimal impact. If we go with electrical gear, we wouldn't be able to have a big enough generator to support so it's really the reliability, what keeps us going back to natural gas and diesel fuel backup.
And this system that we did engineer in it's a split fuel system. So we have the ability to, just like we had this winter, which was a first for me in the last 9 years, that we actually had to go off natural gas. The temperatures in Canada reduced the supply, so we did have to run the plant over a weekend for the jail and stuff to keep them warm. We had to run on diesel fuel. So this would be the same type of setup.
So I'm gonna go to Commissioner Jordan. We are already way over.
Oh,
so,
sorry.
No, you're good. I'm just gonna be, yeah.
It's us, it's not you.
Yeah, no, we had lots of questions. But I know we're gonna
Put an hour
continue
down.
the conversation, but Commissioner Jordan, and then we'll kind of wrap things up here.
Okay.
Yeah, one of the things that I'd appreciate as we think about this is just getting more specific information as to how you calculated the savings piece. You just kind of list utility savings for operations. So I'm curious if you can maybe put something in writing for the board saying, here's where that number comes from. Here's what the calculation is. It includes this. It doesn't include that. I think that would be useful for me to look at.
We can put that together and send it to you.
Thank you.
Okay, so it sounds like our next steps are you're gonna need to come back to us because we're gonna make some decisions and really
Okay.
look at what options. So I think Scott, you and Granny probably need to really help us think through the financing and all of that.
Yep, we have until about the end of July, early August for a decision. So it's not a decision today, but we've got to be able to be in a position if we're gonna go this approach.
They want a contract budget.
Right,
So,
end
and
of
it's
July,
still-
early August. So we've got to have some touch bases before that.
So, okay. Okay, thank you very much. It's a lot of really great information. Appreciate all the effort you guys are putting into this and helping us think through it.
Thank you.
Okay. Randy, you're gonna be in the hot seat after that. Seems like a hot seat today.
Yeah, we went easy on Gil. You're ready.
That's why Jim is sitting in the background here. Have him for backup. Good morning, commissioners. The first topic we have is the juvenile detention facility and jail sales tax. Jim put together, remember, we briefed you, I want to say a few months ago, and again this last month, that this is a sales tax that is currently set to expire December 31st, 2025. I did reach out to our elections manager, and he suggested that we put this on the November ballot of this year for the first try at extending that. Currently, this sales tax began, Mr. Amacio put this together for us, a nice little summary. But this began,
I'm gonna just double check, so I'm not seeing anything in our.
It did get missed in the packet.
There's not, it just.
Yeah,
Oh,
my apologies. We just, we're a little late on Friday. We can get copies, yeah.
so this was originally done back in 1995. It was a 2-year resolution. And then in 98, you extended it for 5. 03, you extended it for 5. 08, you went with 10. And then in 15, you extended it for another 10. But at that, in 2015, the first ones up through 2003 through 2015, we used it for all allowable purposes that are in the RCW, which includes financing, design, acquisition, construction, equipping, operating, maintaining, remodeling, repairing, equipping, and improvement of juvenile detention centers and jails. Then in 2015, the commissioners, when they went out to renew that sales tax, they took out some of those legal availabilities. And when they went out, they said it would only be used for financing, equipping, operating, maintaining, repairing, and re-equipping juvenile detention facilities and jails. So as we go back out, if you want to keep those same uses, we would need to add that we would leave that in the resolution, or if you want to expand it back to the fully allowed by RCW, we can do that as well. Really, the only thing you're not saying that you won't use it for is really the design, acquisition, construction. Our current uses exceed the tax that we get. So leaving those 3 out, which those 3 kind of look like Proposition 1 or Measure 1 was. I don't think that's a risk for us because we feel our current uses will exceed the revenue we get from that sales tax. So I don't think we have to change that.
When we put it out in 2015, board members, the then county commissioners deliberately eliminated certain of the uses that the juvenile justice and jail 0.1% tax could be used for. And they did it because at that point in time, they weren't sure, they wanted to make it clear that they weren't going to use it to remodel, if you will, the jail downtown. So they removed, at least in 2015, some of those particular items. In addition to determining if you want to leave those in or out, another thing that the prior county commissioners did in regard to each one of the ballot propositions that they put before the voters, except the first, they reduced to writing how the money had been spent for the previous time frame. And so they did that by attaching to the ballot proposition resolution a listing. For example, how many people were hired in juvenile? How many people were hired in the jail? Did we pay for the Martin Hall out of this money? So we have done that in the past, and except in 2015, we weren't quite as strict as to what we shared with the people. Previously, we kind of put the entire budget of how we spent the money. But in 2015, because that was so complex, the then county commissioners, instead of putting entirely how we spent the money, they summarized it. How many staff and what particular location were hired, how many people were being paid for out of this particular sales tax. So as you move forward, whenever you place this before the elector, you have to make three decisions. One, what time frame do you want to make it? 10 years, you can make it perpetual if you want. You can make it 15 or whatever time frame you want, board members. As Randy indicated previously, it was for 2 years, 2 years, 5 years, 2 years, 2 years, 2 years, 5 years, 5 years, 10 years, and 10 years. 2 years, 5 years, 5 years, 10 years, and presently 10 years. You can make it whatever time frame you want. Additionally, as Randy indicated, you have to determine how you want to spend the monies. And how you want to spend the monies is in the ballot language itself. So if you want to eliminate certain uses of the resources, we need to take that out of the ballot language so people actually know what it's going to be spent for. And as Randy indicated before, we've learned with regard to measure 1 that people look very closely at the ballot language and they want to apparently know exactly how the resources are going to be spent. So number 1, you need to know the term. Number 2, how it's going to be spent. And then number 3, and this is up to the Board of County Commissioners, in previous measures placed before the electorate, that is to say the last 4 times, you've attached to the ballot language how the money was spent. And so it tells our story in the resolution itself that we send, if you will, to the elections department for processing.
But it's not all in the.
You can do it, Madam Chair. You can make it summarily or more voluminous. It depends up to you. And I think most recently in the 2015 ballot language, we did it more generally. How many positions were funded in juvenile? How many positions were funded in the jail, if you will? How many positions were funded in other departments that are funded by this? Because remember, the money is for juvenile justice facilities and jails. It's for 2 things. And it can also be used for Martin Hall because that's a co-located facility. So I believe Tessa can correct me, to the best of my knowledge, our financial responsibilities for Martin Hall legally are paid for out of this particular juvenile justice sales tax.
I've got Commissioner Jordan. So let me go to him quick.
Yeah,
Commissioner Jordan.
thanks for that information, Jim. I was just wondering, are any of those past resolutions or attachments, is that in the packet that's been handed out, or is that something you can provide us just to look at the historical context there?
Commissioner Jordan, I prepared this weekend just a summary statement, Commissioner Jordan, and it lists all the resolution numbers, whether or not they were for all the items in the law that we can use the money for, or just some. And then I also indicated the time frame that they ran, and also, if you will, whether or not there was a robust or a simple attachment showing how the money is spent. So I'm more than happy to share that with the Board of County Commissioners. It's all a matter of public record, board members.
No,
Thank you.
Commissioner Jordan, that I think it'd be helpful is to say what the ballot showed for each of them versus the resolution. Just the ballot title or what was put on the ballot. I think that's what the.
Madam Chair, we can send a copy of all the ballot resolutions that you can see it personally. We're more than happy to do that. We'll get it out today.
I think that'd be great. Now, one question I have is we've said that the expenditures exceed the revenue that's come in, but what I see here is it doesn't.
What you see on this
So
sheet,
explain what this is.
this is
versus-
only the expenditures for juvenile detention and Martin Hall. But it can be used for juvenile detention, Martin Hall, and also various parts of a jail. Is adult detention.
So we listed these items as priority payments. So we would pay for juvenile Martin Hall first and second order of effect, and then remaining available funds goes to cover the adult detention facility.
And what does it cover within the adult detention facility?
Previous resolutions have listed various positions, corrections officers, sergeants at both facilities, I believe, if my memory serves correctly.
It covers operating, equipping, maintaining, repairing, re-equipping and financing any of those facilities. That's all it can be used for, much everything. We just can't
Chairman
use it-
Cuny,
we just can't use it to construct new facilities based on the current.
But first and foremost, we're using it in juvenile.
Yes.
Correct. And then the additional is going into the
Yes.
jail. Okay, just thanks for that clarification. And then I think the other thing, to question I have is going back to looking at those ballot resolutions, because in my mind, we would stick with the RCW and keep it as what the intent was from the RCW versus continuing to limit it. I don't know if that, I don't know what difference that really makes, other than it's saying we can't use it on construction for the jail. Which we're not constructing a jail, so, but in the future, if we did this for a 10-year period, if in the future, we're looking at doing. I mean, we know we've got capital facilities needs at juvenile. Can it be used there if we didn't allow for it? So I mean, so that's what I would want to make sure that we're able to use it to help on capital needs that we know that we have with detention, with the juvenile.
Commissioner Cuny, and to that point, I would say the one item that was removed from the legal that would be helpful for us in juvenile detention is the remodeling and or construction or design pieces. That facility is aging, so if you ever did want to use this tax for it, you would need
To
to
have
have
that.
that added back.
So, which would then be just a means of having it be part of, keeping with the RCW.
Yes.
But, as part of the educational campaign for this would be then informing the public as to how we intend to spend those dollars.
The RCW says, it lays it out, it says monies received from any tax imposed under this section shall be used solely for the purpose of providing funds for costs associated with financing, design, acquisition, construction, equipping, operating, maintaining, remodeling, repairing, re-equipping, and improvement of juvenile detention facilities and jails. So that's the RCW definition.
So when you send out the ballot resolutions, if you'd send out that.
Yep.
The RCW as well, because I think that's part of what we need to compare and contrast to.
the longer you make the ballot proposition, Madam Chair, the more flexibility you need, because you don't know right now, if you make it 10 or 15 or 20 years or whatever, perpetual, you want the most flexibility that the law provides in expending those resources. I think that's what I'm hearing you say, which makes sense. And you will see, Commissioner Kearns, when Randy sends out the summary I gave him, how it was limited 10 years ago when the then Board of County Commissioners placed before the electorate. Instead of articulating all those items you did under the law, they eliminated some. And I'm hearing the board suggesting that as you move forward, you'd like to reinsert those into the ballot proposition to provide the board with more flexibility depending upon whatever time frame you determine.
And it looks like the 1/10 is the max on this. It's not like the criminal justice where it can go up to 1/10 is the max.
And unlike other taxes, as you point out, Commissioner Kearns, everyone pays for it in the entire county. There's no subtraction for sales of cars. There's no sharing of 40% with any other public entities.
Okay, so Jim, one of the things you stated that there was 3 things we needed to consider: time frame,
Time frame,
and then I put purpose.
purpose, and then how expressive, Madam Chair, you want the attachment be as to how you spent the resources. And as I've indicated, except for the first ballot proposition, all the others, you outlined how you'd spent the money during the last 3 or 5 or whatever years it ran. So people would know what you spent the money on. Whether or not you want to include that or not is an option with the board.
Can you tell me where would that be? Are you talking about like in a voter's guide thing? Cause they're not gonna put something
It's
like
right-
that on a
That's
ballot.
attached to the resolution,
It's only
the
a
ballot
resolution.
proposition.
It's not on
Oh,
the
okay,
ballot.
okay.
It tells our story.
Okay, I was confused,
Good.
like where will that document be where the public is gonna see it, but okay.
Which is why I think we want to see what the ballot actually shows
Yeah.
versus the
Right,
ballot
right.
resolution. So
Yeah.
it's like, so we need the main RCW.
Yeah.
What the ballot actually showed for each of them.
Yeah.
And the ballot resolution that went.
We'll have that.
And we would have that out.
Okay, cool. That'd be
And
great.
the county voter education could include a bulleted list and, you know, more information on
Yes.
the positions and what's funded and all of those things.
Madam Chair, as we all know, thank you for raising that, Commissioner Walder. Now, the Board of County Commissioners, at the same time you place this before the electors, whenever that is, you have to appoint committees consisting of 3 people in support or opposition to the ballot measure. And if we don't do that, then it's up to the auditor to do that. And then they place statements, as you pointed out, into the pamphlet that's submitted by the electors, to the electors in this particular case.
Yeah, I was speaking more to just general information about what is funded, not political statements.
yeah. And I think that's why they attach.
Right.
This incidentally, in the prior ballot measure resolutions. I have placed what the vote was in all the prior elections, so people can see it.
Yeah, I think that would be good.
Yeah, it's in the resolution that we prepared, so you can see how successful the voters in Spokane County have voted this particular measure. Anyway, so that's again, something you don't need to have in there, or you can. Finally, I'm aware of what happened in measure number 1, so I think Chris and I, when we've looked at the ballot proposition in this case, we've tried to fashion it more like what Judge Hazel did with the measure number 1, because they got to have the same, by law, the prosecuting attorney's office prepares this, but it has to have certain elements in it. So we've tried to make it consistent with that. And what we're probably going to do now, based upon what I'm hearing the board do, is add all the lawful uses of the money in the ballot proposition, similar to what it was before the 2015 measure. So they'll all be there, and the board, if you'd like to eliminate some of those, you certainly can.
Choose to do that. Okay, so then you'll actually, when you send all this information out, you will have a draft resolution.
Yes.
Yes, we will.
So, yes.
I already have a draft resolution from Mr. Mayshow. Jim will just tweak it for those few other things, and then we will get that out to you as well, along with the past resolutions.
Okay, and then one more item for the commissioners that I talked to the elections manager. This would appear on the ballot after the state initiatives. Before any of the individual candidates are there. So it does appear at the top of the ballot. I guess is what I'm letting people know before you get to all the different individual races, even above the president.
Oh,
So,
Because all the initiatives come first.
yes,
And
I
then
thought
individual.
president was always first, but it's not.
I don't think so.
Oh, okay.
So we may want to clarify that, but that was my understanding. And I think that helps us, to decide it's gonna be at the top of the ballot versus at the very end of the ballot, because it'll be I think the primary ballot's gonna be a long ballot because of all the numbers in each
people.
race. But the general will be not quite as long, and that these initiatives will be ahead of individuals. So we may just want to confirm that.
I will confirm that. Sure.
So
So Madam Chair, so the proposal. So you're proposing that we put this on in November?
That is the recommendation of
Okay.
our election managers.
Okay.
Which means we would have to have the resolution passed before the primary. So this has to be sometime in July.
yes.
That would be
And I
August.
suspect,
6th,
Randy,
I
the
believe.
board would want the
Yes.
2 touch on this. It's up to the board, but one day, Randy and I would brief you on a proposed ballot language. Be on a Tuesday morning, and then the following Tuesday, in your normal process, the second touch is when at your 2 o'clock consent agenda, you take formal action on the measure that we have drawn to.
July 23rd would be the date that we would have to approve the consent. Because we are off.
We're off
those
on
2
the
weeks.
following.
So unless we did a special meeting, which I prefer just to go through our normal process, so.
So
Um,
I would. I know we are getting together on Monday, July 8th. I would say that we could spend some time on that strategic planning to fill in the blanks. What's the time period? Make sure the wording of the ballot is correct. Then we could get any of those changes, come to you on the 16th. And then again, the 23rd for adoption.
I think that's. Whether it goes or not, that's the timeline, and I think that'd be the next time, the 8th, which gives everyone time to look at it, talk about it, figure out where they want to be.
Madam Chair, this is one of the few ballot propositions that I've seen previous board members, once it's before the electorate, actually in open session, take a position in support of the ballot measure. And this is one of the few times where, in which, as the board knows, you have the ability as a group to support any ballot proposition as long as it's placed before you in an open meeting and people in opposition can speak the same timeframe. But my point in saying this is one of the few times that the record reflects the sitting board members felt so strongly about the necessity of the juvenile justice tax that they actually, in a formal session, took a position to support it. That doesn't mean you have to, but this is one of the few times you've ever done that.
Can I mean, why is November the recommended? Because as I look at the dates where it's previously been, it's been over 25 years since we've ever put it on a November ballot. It was on a September, which back then was a primary, back in 03, that's when Washington had its primary. In 08, we had it on a March, which we don't have March anymore, but still that would have been a special. And then in 2015, an April, that would have been a special election as well. So I mean, we haven't done a November since 98, since a lot of us in this room were in high school. So not all of us,
Not
but,
me.
but a lot of us. So, I mean, why do we think November is the way to go?
One, it'll be, excuse me, when I was speaking with Mike, one is that this will be a good turnout of this election. And also it costs the county less money to put it on the November election because we already have issues on the election. Whereas if we put it on a spring election that we have no issues on, it does cost us quite a bit of money to be part of those elections.
Well, depending on which school district, I mean, if every school district has something on the ballot, everyone's getting a ballot.
It
So
tends to
we're-
be February would be that,
Okay,
because then April is for the. What tends to happen
April's
is.
sort of the follow-up one,
Yes,
for
if it,
ones that
if it
fail.
failed
Yeah,
in February, then it goes in April, so you don't have everything on April.
okay.
So, yes, the cost.
And
of
We've done a March, which I assume is the old February, maybe? I mean, I don't know what March of 08 was. I don't know, is that
Yes.
the old
And we're just
February?
like,
one? I don't know.
And
are we in a time frame where people are gonna be, if they're gonna be voting on schools, are they gonna vote for renewal? Even though it's
I don't know.
renewal, it's still a tax, and so, I think November's,
And that was his other issue is that he, at this time, he knows of no other tax issues on the ballot at the same time,
Well, except the state ones,
except the states.
initiatives.
initiative, yeah.
So at this point, the schools, there's been no bonds put forward, but that could change.
Yes, that could
That
change.
can always change.
So I think between now and, July 8th, I mean, those are questions to be asking, but I do know it's like. An election is about $300,000.
A little bit more right now. Because of mailing costs and having to send
Since now
out the
we're paying
pamphlet
for
for everything.
postage.
It's getting closer to 4
And
now.
then having to put out the voters manual. Cause I think we still have to even
We have to do that by law now, you're
for
correct.
every election.
Yes.
Yes.
So, the other thing that doing in November would allow for the state of the county, we'd be able to address it during the state of the county as well. It's not on my topics, but it would become a topic. We need to. So. And then I would say that the other thing that I would like to see in July at that meeting would be what would go away if this doesn't pass? Cause it doesn't matter when it's on a ballot. If we don't renew this, what would go away?
15.8 million in revenue.
A lot.
No, yeah, a lot, but I mean, but I think, you know, in some ways we need to quantify that as well as quantifying what we're using it for, to say those are. Yeah, would we be able to fund our juvenile detention facility?
Not to the extent we do today.
So, like, but that's part of that discussion that we have to have. Okay,
All right.
Thank you.
we'll see you back on this topic on July
On
8th.
July 8th. The last one we have is the budget guidance letter. We've made a couple of tweaks since that, along with the budget timeline. This again will be going out to the departments later this month. We'd be talking to the department heads at their meeting
Tomorrow afternoon.
about this. Is if this is okay. We haven't heard any other comments from you, but if you have any other comments, we can get those made part of this.
It's very close to what the board saw last time. There were just some minor kind of wording and flow changes in there, but the content remains fairly consistent.
Discussion, too, last time, having to just be the board sign in as well as the CEO. So,
Yeah, I'm fine, whoever wants to say, and I mean, it's not red lines, I don't know what was changed, but the original draft I thought was fine. I mean,
It really was just sentence structure changes.
yes, then,
So
no,
we're fine.
I thought it was good, the first draft we read, yeah. Whether you want one of us, the CEO, or all of us to sign, I'm good either way.
And then the only other changes on the budget timeline, we did add November 18th for the property tax discussion. That is going to be, I believe, the Monday prior to the, when you leave for Waco. Wausau.
Pick a
Got it
double
wrong
letter.
again.
Waco, Wausau.
Yeah, so that is the Monday of that week. Typically, we would have had it the following week, but that is Thanksgiving week this year. So we moved it up to that preceding Monday. That's the only change we've made to the calendar.
Where is Wausau again this year, Mary?
Clark County.
So have those Outlook invitations been sent out for the budget dates or?
We have not sent those out yet.
But we would work with Gina to make sure it all gets
good.
noticed appropriately. That's why we like to set up, so she has her playbook ready
Yes.
for the public hearings.
Sounds.
All of that looks good. We are completed on our things for today.
Got us back on schedule.
Got closer.
Oh, you're right on time, 10:30.
Or is it
Do you
before two?
have any thoughts on you signing this?
I think given the tone and tenor of it this year, I think I shared last time we talked. I think it's important to come from the board. I don't really care whether I sign or not. I think this is we're going into the beginning of a series of challenging budget years. And so I think having the elections and department heads know this is coming from the board, you had your eyes on it, and you're setting this kind of structure, I think will be informed.
I'm fine with that.
Okay,
Can you
so,
hand that out? Good morning.
good morning, Mike Sparker.
Get you back on track here. I've been working with the prosecutor's office on retaining outside counsel for the alternative delivery method. And so Jim has very graciously worked on this project, and I'll turn it over to you. Well, thank you very much. As the board knows, we are moving forward on the Crisis Relief and Sobering Center. And I think staff is recommending that we use the progressive design build approach for that because it saves money and time. In this regard, the prosecuting attorney's office has previously, with the approval of the department involved, appointed or specially deputized an attorney whose name is Zach Tomlinson. And Zach is an expert on the progressive design build approach. We used him on the Parks project, if you will, board members. And so in this particular case, Chris and Prosecutor Haskell and Mike Sparber, we have agreed to further deputize Mr. Tomlinson so he can assist us in moving forward in conjunction with preparing the RFQ, the RFP, and any contract documents in conjunction with the Crisis Relief and Sobering Center. So we're here simply to tell you that that's the direction we're going forth on. We don't need the board's formal action on this because Mr. Sparber has the ability to sign service agreements up to a maximum amount of $30,000. In this particular case, I have talked with Mr. Tomlinson, and he has shared with me that he doesn't believe it will anywhere near come close to that amount of money. It's Mr. Anderson and my hope that we can continue to learn on the design build progressive approach so that in the future, we won't always need to hire outside legal counsel. But in this particular case, we are going to continue to use Mr. Tomlinson to assist us. Does the board have any questions with regard to this? Mike, did I leave anything out? I don't think so. Nice job, Jim.
Just one clarification to what Jim said. The approach we're taking with this is to assist us with the alternative delivery methods. We think a progressive design is likely the recommended approach, but when we bring our owner's rep on board, they'll help clarify and give us some pros and cons of using that versus others. So we're not predisposed to saying that is the only one. It's really more of using outside counsel to help us with our alternative delivery.
Correct. Thank you, Madam Chair. And Mr. Tomlinson has helped us previously, and I know Chris surveyed all the people who he had worked with, and they were all very comfortable and made very nice statements about the services he provided for us. So I think that's why Chris recommended to Larry that we move forward with, especially deputizing Mr. Tomlinson again. Thank you, board members.
Thank you, Jim.
Yeah.
Take us to George and.
We're gonna let Pavel take this one.
Okay.
He's our primary point of contact on this.
Morning, commissioners, Madam Chair. We just wanted to give an update on the Price project. It was an application that we submitted with partnership with Department of Commerce. We've got a couple parcels at the, just some background, it's the accident potential zone, acquisition and relocation and building, new land for manufactured housing elsewhere. So basically the application is in now, the Department of Commerce. We've successfully gotten a handful of support letters, commitment letters from service providers in Spokane County. The application is for $20 million of prize funding through Department of Commerce. We've done leveraging of funds, planning for some sort of mortgages or financing for the manufactured housing. Because we need to find some kind of leveraging for the funding. So we use those funds, and there's also a potential grant opportunity in which the application is due in September. And we could potentially use that money to acquire accident potential zone land. So we're currently in still progressing toward this project, but thankfully we got the application in, we got all our edits in, and it's looking quite promising. I guess we're really here to give you all an update, see if you have any questions on the project, see if you want us to fill you in on anything.
Thanks. I was hoping to get a little more detail on the types of affordable housing that would be developed. Like how many units? So for the $20 million that we're saying we want in Spokane County, out of the 85 million that the state potentially will put forward to HUD, what number of new affordable units are we hoping to get for that?
So we're.
Or how much percentage of the money would go towards just taking down dilapidated, and how much would go towards building new units?
So we're planning on, we're trying to get as many as we can, but the plan is to get a round number of 100 units. Find 1 or 2 parcels, get 50 on each of 2 parcels or one large 100 unit development. But the goal would be 100 new units with potential of a percentage of current APZ residents to move into that new development. We've also had a preemptive partnership with Valley Latinos in Spokane. So they have over 60 families that are already ready to finance and buy manufactured homes. They just basically need a place to live. They need a place to place their homes. So we can offer this kind of development to create the opportunity for those families that are already ready. So we're definitely planning to have a net positive of affordable units. It won't be a net positive of 100, but it could potentially be a net positive of like 70 affordable units in Spokane.
I think one important piece to this, as Paula mentioned, Latinos in Spokane, is these are just some of the partners that we've been talking with, working with, putting together the proposal. So if we do end up getting Commerce, the county ends up getting this award, then we would be doing a request for proposals like we typically do if we got that grant. So we're just identifying some partners to help build out what this application looks like, but there would be a formal selection process.
Yeah, preemptive partnerships. Nothing certain.
Paul, could you talk a little bit about the relationship with the city of Airway Heights as well as Fairchild Air Force Base, some of the conversations you've had there?
Sure. So we had some conversations with Fairchild and Airway Heights, just making sure that we're all on the same page, that our goals are aligned. And it sounds like Fairchild, we have a contact there that is all for this project, all for us potentially acquiring land in accident potential zone. Airway Heights, I believe it was last year or 2 years ago, they submitted an application to acquire accident potential zone parcels. So we would potentially partner with them to submit another application to be able to use that funding to acquire land. That one's specifically like one of the eligible costs is specifically acquiring land. So both Airway Heights and Fairchild, they're all for this, and they're fully supporting the project. We've got a bunch of, like I said, a bunch of potential partners in Spokane County that are all supportive of the project.
Do you have to build new manufactured homes, or can you build other types of affordable housing?
I believe that it's manufactured homes, but I think you could really call it cottage houses. You could call it manufactured homes. I think there are a couple other terms you can use. I don't know exactly what the differences between them are, maybe square footage. But the plan would be to make sure that we get home ownership opportunities for APZ residents. And that may be potentially doing cottage homes, something that is more affordable, maybe $80,000 per unit. With the appropriate down payment assistance, we can potentially get monthly payments for mortgage and whatnot, to $500 or less a month. So that would be the goal, getting the appropriate type of housing to make sure that it's affordable.
So the number one goal is, the number one group of people that would be housed would be people who are relocated from the APZ. And
That would
then,
be the priority, yes.
but then you could offer it then to other folks after that.
Correct.
Okay, and where do the homes have to be located? Does the HUD grant, does it say you have to locate them exactly in the same, no, obviously not the same area, but like,
Yeah.
what are you guys thinking about with your partners that you've talked to? Cause you gotta have land to build those homes
Correct.
somewhere, and I know there's, Airway Heights is kind of built out, at least in its current UGA.
That would be one of the next steps that we'd have to take, is identifying the new land of where to develop. We probably would not want to get all these families out of the West Plains and move them to Liberty Lake or something like that. We probably want it to be somewhere close. I see Commissioner French has a question as well, but
I just didn't know what you had proposed in the application around that.
for the application, it was proposed that we have potential land that we'd like to acquire, but land is yet to be identified for where we're developing.
Commissioner French.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. As I know I think majority of the board knows, but maybe all know, we've been working with the Highline Village development in Airway Heights to and the three developers, both Habitat for Communities and Community Frameworks, as well as Jim Frank, to build affordable housing on the West Plains there as replacement housing for those that are currently residing in the mobile home parks. The challenge with the current grant is it doesn't allow you to pay for land and stuff, so we do need to secure additional land to accommodate more housing. But the other challenge we have is one, expanding UGA for Airway Heights to accommodate more land that can be dedicated to housing. As you know, we've been challenged in terms of trying to even do land swaps there, much less securing additional land. And then the other challenge is water. The city of Spokane has effectively put the city of Airway Heights on a water diet, which interferes with our ability to build more housing within the boundaries of Airway Heights. So there's a couple challenges ahead of us, but we will eventually work our way through them. But pursuing this grant would certainly be a plus. Thank you.
So, correct me if I'm wrong though, too, one of the challenges is actually purchasing the mobile home parks to actually then move the people off of them.
So we understand now that there are two mobile home parks that are actually very anxious to sell. And can we put together a PSA to acquire them? And the price is moving in the right direction, not the wrong direction and stuff. So we did have a conversation about this last week and developing a strategy to try and move forward with acquiring the parks so that we can prevent backfill. But you're exactly right. Backfill is a big concern. So if we don't own the park, it's difficult to prevent the backfill from happening.
Thank you.
So that is one of the things that we may potentially do. That's why we want to make sure we apply for this new funding source that is strictly for acquisition. This can be leveraged with the commerce application. We can send in a letter to HUD basically saying, hey, we've got this other funding source secured. and getting some sort of contract that would be, that would have a conditional purchase if we receive funding. So just something that we kind of have to plan out with legal, see how to go about that.
Yeah, still a lot of unknowns, but really excited about the opportunity to maybe get the leverage funds in to address something that, as Commissioner Bench said, has been something we've been working on for quite a while. So grateful for Pavel and his efforts to really spearhead this.
You said you spoke with Airway Heights and they were supportive of this. Do you know, so is that where you envision sort of the two parts? You acquire the mobile home parks that are in the APZ, but then construct a new one somewhere else, whether that be a mobile home park or the cottage style housing? Do you know, does their zoning allow for cottage style housing? Cause I know some jurisdictions have essentially made it to where you can't do the cottage style housing anymore. Are their development regs allow for that? Are we?
We've been
Sure.
working with Heather Troutman.
Oh, okay.
The
Okay, great.
planning director up there. So, so yeah, we've been looking into that, evaluating those options.
Okay.
I think to Pavel's point, we want to make sure that folks that are relocated from that area are relocated to the area that makes the most sense.
Yeah.
So Airway Heights seems to make the most sense,
Close by.
but
Yeah.
we're also we know that land can be difficult to acquire and costly, so we'll evaluate that in more detail once we get to notice if we receive the funding or not.
Yeah, we're also in the comprehensive plan draft right now. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of zoning changes will be proposed through that. That's gonna be fairly soon. I think that would go live 2026. So that would play a role potentially with this project.
Yeah, but I mean, these would be more your development regulations. I don't think I don't know, I wouldn't expect they would change something like that in the big comp plan update of 2026. But if you're working with Heather and if she knows cottage style housing is something you're looking, I'm sure she would have told you by now, hey, we don't allow that here. So I would assume you're probably okay then.
Yeah, we're in good hands with Heather.
All right.
Great. Can I ask one last question? So are you anticipating though, when I spoke with Kay Verano a couple weeks ago from the state Department of Commerce, who's collecting and putting together the big proposal from all these applications from across the state from different counties. She did receive initially, a request for more dollars than the $85 million cap. Are you anticipating that Commerce will come back and ask different counties to reduce their asks to get under that 85 million? Or
I think they're going to ask potentially for reductions, but I think we've probably got the strongest application in. We also have the most match funding, I'm pretty sure, in the entire application, because we're basically leveraging future financing opportunities for the homes and this secondary grant funding that we have high likelihood of getting. So I think that for our application, I feel like they wouldn't try to chip away at it, potentially mostly cut other projects out.
Yeah, Commerce is really, to Commissioner Waldrop's point, it's a master application. We're one of the partners in that. And it's been our understanding that we've got, to Paul's point, the strongest application. If they have to do reductions, if they get that, it would be less likely that our application would be seeing a significant reduction.
great, good job, Paul.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you.
Yep.
It's gonna take us to Scott Chesney. It's gonna be up next. I saw him in the hall, so. Here's the one representation.
Plan to call out.
Good morning, Commissioners.
How are you doing this morning?
Good. Thank you for your
patience. It's the one of those early discussions about the comprehensive plan that will lead us down a path.
You made it big enough so we can all read it. I love it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh. We have a few slides for you, some of which you have seen or parts have seen before, about a month ago when we first talked to you about housing. And we'll run through those for our benefit and the benefit of the tens of thousands of our viewers at home who are watching us. Ron, if you could.
Method A, method B, you have several.
Oh, I'm sorry, there was just a single slideshow that we uploaded. Generally speaking, what we're here to discuss today is a new part of GMA introduced by the legislature, creating additions to what was simply before the housing element of the Growth Management Act, one of the major required elements along with land use, transportation, open space, rural economic development, and so on. Now in housing, we are required to not only provide for affordable housing, but to break that down by area median income groups. And then those must be allocated to each of the cities and towns in something resembling or at least called a fair share. Those of us that date back quite a ways probably remember fair share housing from the 1970s. I was just at school learning about it, but I remember it. And it was not a particularly successful experiment in housing. It led to things like the Robert Taylor homes in Chicago and Pruitt-Igoe in St. Louis that were really horrible places to live, but it fell under that Urban Redevelopment Act of the 70s. So the words fair share housing unfortunately have some baggage to them. But in this case, what it's simply saying is it's breaking down housing by the area median income. So 0 to 30% area median income, 30 to 50, 50 to 80, and so on. And then each of those has to be allocated to the communities by some percentage. When we first talked with you, we had a method A and a method B from Commerce. Next slide, please, Rob. And it's the housing, or it's called the Housing for All planning tool. It was created by Commerce to provide a defensible methodology for us to break out our housing allocations. Next slide, please. And generally speaking, it does two things, or has two versions at this point, an A and a B, and then it leaves open the opportunity for a third or another version, which is essentially anything that we wish to create, as long as we can defend it to Commerce and the legislature. Next slide, please. And so method A allocates housing based on the share of projected growth. And so if an area is expected to grow by 4%, it gets 4% of those income group allocated. Method B goes to what share of the county's population will you have in 2046, and allocates that housing based on that share of the population at the end of the timeline. Next, please. So here's method A on the screen, and again, these are hard charts to read. In fact, let's just go two more slides. There's B and one more, and that's sorry, that's that one. What we've done here is we've put up, and we have this in front of you. This is method A and method B by comparison. What you can see for the unincorporated county is notable, for example, in the 30 to 50% bracket, the expected share of housing for the county moves from 3,000 units to almost 14,000 units, or more than 14,000 units based on that allocation. And if you look below, particularly in the city, they end up with negative numbers in this methodology. And that doesn't mean that the city should get rid of housing. It simply means it has more than its share based on this projection. What that means though is these units must be allocated somewhere, and so they essentially default to the county. And that gives us the bigger share of that responsibility. Now, the most important thing to realize about this is these are not requirements to build or construct housing in these income levels. It is required only that we create our development regulations that allow for these to be constructed by zoning. And so it's essentially a regulatory system that tries to set the table, if you will, for developers and others to build housing that serves these affordable units in each of the jurisdictions and each of the allocations. We had hoped that by the time we got here today that we would have what Commerce calls their modified method A. They had promised that to us in May. In fact, our guys here, Bongo and Tate, were working with Commerce and got kind of a preview of where that's going, but it hasn't yet been released. Generally speaking, it's going to allow for, instead of just that one lump unincorporated Spokane County, it will allow for some fine tuning based on the urban growth areas as they're currently defined, as well as breaking out the urban growth areas versus the rural. So it'll benefit our methodology. It really won't make much of a difference for the various cities and towns. So the long and short of today's discussion is kind of twofold. One is to give you this comparison that is the methodology that Commerce is suggesting, which is, of course, defensible. Those of you who are on the steering committee have heard the last discussion from the steering committee where Airway Heights was not supportive of method A. The others were sort of wavering. We have heard from our colleagues across the river that the city's elected officials may not be comfortable with method A any longer. And so we're obviously going to be seeking a consensus with the steering committee. But the challenge, or unfortunately the responsibility, is if any of the communities wish to opt out or don't like a methodology, don't want to participate in that, that responsibility falls back on Board of County Commissioners. Because at the end of this process, this board has to make this allocation. And so our message to our planners through the PTAC back to their electeds is, if you don't like the methodology, come with a solution, bring something back that works. Because if you simply sit on the sidelines, the county will have to make this recommendation on your behalf. And it's not that, we were taking that heavy-handed position. We've tried very hard to be a good planning partner with all of our communities. But when accountability comes down, if this is not done properly, it will be the county that is the subject of litigation, not the communities. So it falls entirely on us to ultimately make these allocations in some defensible fashion. And so that's what we're looking for today is both to show you these numbers and then talk with you and get some ideas on how you would like to consider handling these allocations. Now, in addition to this, the next couple slides, Ron, next one, please. The PTAC has been talking about some alternatives in addition to just the A and B version. One, the two you can see here, one is transit oriented or awaited transit, with the idea that this housing, especially at the lower AMI levels, is better suited in places where transit exists. So these people that perhaps are struggling to provide housing also don't have to have automobiles or could travel on public transit. While that is a completely valid solution, the transit network doesn't extend very far into the unincorporated parts of the county. So it doesn't really help the county's allocations as much as it does the cities and really just the cities in the metro core, with the exception of Cheney that has its own route. Another option is adjusting it by taking out some of the area median income. So say take 20% off the top, and then redistribute that based on the AMI of each particular place. And then one more slide, please. Another third one would be moving the urban and rural areas out and try to balance another 20 or 30% of the population based on that. So these are some options that we've put in front of the PTAC. They will be meeting later this week to consider these. We are we're looking at a calendar where the steering committee will get an update of this at their July meeting, which is why we're here before you today. And the intention is to have the steering committee see essentially a draft, a finished draft of this recommendation at their September meeting and make a decision in November. I don't see the practicality of waiting past that, because if we get into 2025 and we still haven't made these very basic decisions of where these allocations are going to go, it's going to be very hard to compete the rest of that comprehensive planning process if we simply haven't made these decisions. So we're going to be pushing the PTAC and the steering committee to stay on this schedule to move forward, which, as I said, kind of falls back on us, because if they're simply foot dragging, we're going to be back before you in September and November saying we need to make a decision.
So what's your recommendation for us? A or B?
Well, I would say right now, the facts and the data don't fully support a single recommendation. We're struggling. One thing that the Commerce put this on the table for us, which is in one way good, because it's an accepted group that everybody can like or dislike. They haven't shown us what's behind the box. For example, we can't see the formulas being used in these Excel sheets, for example. What we saw from steering committee and PTAC early on was a general support for method A, or at least more support for method A than for method B at the time. That, I guess we have to go back and test that, whether that's deteriorating or not. Airway Heights and Liberty Lake were initially skeptical of A. Liberty Lake seems to have kind of drifted back into the A column. Airway Heights, those of you that were at the last steering committee, they were like fighting words. They were like, we're not going to accept method A.
So can you explain to us why? I mean, what, like you said, City of Spokane said they don't think they can support A. Does that mean they do support B? Or they have just said A's completely off the table and we're still not sure about B? And why? Why? I mean, I do remember Airway Heights. It was the new mayor. He was there, and he was I mean, very apt, but honestly, kind of his justification was like, well, it sounds like you don't support any of it, because it's like we want to carve our own path, we want to blaze our own trail, and we don't want anybody to tell us, one direction or another kind of thing. So what are some of the other cities? What's their reason for not liking A or not liking B?
Generally,
because and I'll admit, before he even said, these are very confusing. I mean, it's hard to know, what does this actually mean for your community 5 years, 10 years, 15 down the road? I mean, it's tough to not, there's no crystal ball. Okay, if we do A or B, what do we look like?
It is a completely new process from the legislature. Nobody's done anything like this before. So trying to allocate this is a whole magic box. Generally speaking, I think we can only conclude that cities that don't like one or the other methodology are simply saying we don't want to have low income housing in our community. Mm-hmm. And they're seeing the numbers being added to their community and saying this is not who we are, or we have more than our share of low income houses now. We don't need more. There's a qualitative term to this that is sometimes challenging to acknowledge.
Would it be fair to say my basic understanding of A versus B, based on our steering committee meeting, is that A just looks at all the different types of housing for different income levels over the next 20 years and divides it out kind of not equally, but like proportionately. And then B looks at how much you already have and then allocates it more or less, depending on how much you already have in each category. Is that fair or no?
Yes, that's essentially.
Okay, that's what so I could see where if you don't have a lot of very low income or working family housing, you may resist A because you're gonna have to build a lot more or accommodate, plan for a lot more. And in B, there are communities that already have a lot of that housing. That's why you see a negative number for like the city of Spokane. It goes down in certain categories because they already have built a lot of that housing. But that just pushes more of it into areas that have not traditionally had those units, right? Is that basically, that's my basic understanding. So, but I thought we ended our steering committee meeting saying we wanted to pursue a C.
We did.
Kind of hybrid or something.
The PTAC has been kind of cranking that box ever since, but there's also no agreement on what C would look like.
And that's why you have some different ideas,
Yeah.
but it's gonna take a lot of work.
Our comment to our professional planning colleagues was, if you don't like A or B, bring your suggestions on what you think C should be. And so far, we have not had a very productive session.
Well, because quite frankly, I do worry if there isn't transit to a certain area of unincorporated or a small town in Spokane County, I do think we have to look at the support that different folks in different income levels need to access services. And if those don't exist, then it's probably not appropriate for us to assume that that type of housing should be there. But how do we do that? That's why you're looking at maybe some transit oriented lenses
Yeah.
too.
And we're working with STA to refine their planning approach, which traditionally is, here's our route network. Where can we grow those routes and get funding to do that? Now we're talking with Carl is if we're going to grow our edges in neighborhoods as opposed to just subdivisions, shouldn't we plan on having transit here in 5 years, just like you do for capital facilities? And he has agreed to try to incorporate that into STA planning, which brings them more in line with what we do for comprehensive planning. That doesn't help us today, but it does help a little bit in the future. But your point is spot on. If we're trying to put housing closer to where the services are that people need, the default is it's all going to land in the city. And that's not essentially the fair share approach that the legislature is talking about. They're talking about spreading it through the metropolitan core at the very least. So
But STA normally like follows the comp plan. They look at where growth is projected to go, and then STA builds its plan to support that future growth, but they are doing planning at the same time as this is going on. So I'm hoping we can
we're not
make
that
sure
far
we're okay, because
It's-
that's transit really follows. They will develop their routes and their future growth based on how the
Demand
county,
plays a big
how the
part,
county
too.
will be developing in our comprehensive plan.
Yes.
So I got
Oh.
Commissioner Jordan and Commissioner French. So Commissioner Jordan was first. So I'm gonna go to Commissioner Jordan and then I'll go to Commissioner French.
Hey, Scott, can you just kind of walk me through the mechanics of how this will actually impact things? I think you said that really this is about forcing or requiring development regulations that would accommodate different types of housing, right? So we would adopt a method, there'd be an allocation to different communities. Does that mean that then Airway Heights or the city or whoever would need to change their development regulations, and what would that look like? And then under what time frame would they need to accomplish that prior to our completion of the comp plan in 26?
Yes, each community, each city and town must be in conformance with the county's comprehensive plans. And so as these allocations are made, they will have to adjust their development regs in time for the 2026 adoption.
So what would that look like then in terms of a specific regulation? is it just a density change in terms of allowing permanent supportive housing? Or help me understand what types of development regulations would correlate to the different income banded housing that would be needed to be allowed?
If, Ron, can you go back to those slides at the next slide? There's a table here that talks generally about where these housing levels fall and
Okay.
whether in that low density, which is, as you see, not typically feasible for much under 120%, down to or not down to, but the different kinds of densities and multifamily projects that are typical in using and accommodating these income levels. So this is a very broad matrix, but it's illustrative of the kind of housing structures you need to be able to afford to offer those at affordable rents.
Got it. Thank you.
So essentially rezoning to a bunch of medium or high density. Is essentially in its simplest form.
Maybe overly simplified, but yes, yeah, that's what it's talking about. And what's certainly different from prior versions of this in the 2010s, the city, of course, had its centers and corridors zoning approach, or had a centers and corridors plan, but didn't really have the zoning regulations to build or to accommodate that. Since they've adopted their BOCA standards and increased their densities, much like the county did in 2020, some of these higher densities are already more feasible than they were 5 or 10 years ago. This would be, like another step, another layer of saying, moving that forward.
And just if I could follow up, Scott, so would we, if some of the communities were resistant to making these changes otherwise, right, apart from this process prior to the final plan, would we essentially have to tell them, I'm sorry, you have to? Would that be kind of the county's role to say, hey, we have this deadline, this is the decision that was made, you've got to make X, Y, or Z specific changes?
Commissioner, I may be deflecting over to our counselor here, but yes, the basic point is the county is responsible for the urban growth areas. The county is responsible to implement these. So if there's going to be litigation because they're not implemented properly, it's going to fall on the county. It's not likely going to fall on the cities. So yeah, at the end of our process, hopefully the steering committee will make a consensus recommendation to you, the commissioners, but it will fall on you to make that allocation.
Great.
Thank you.
Commissioner French was next.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm gonna really try hard to keep my comments brief on here, but we're kind of we are assuming that we are operating the updated Growth Management Act and the comp plan in a vacuum, and that just is not the case. We have leakage out of the county into Kootenai County on a regular basis. And if we don't accommodate a full range of housing opportunities, we're gonna see that middle and upper income group take their money, their paychecks, and spend it in Kootenai County and not here in Spokane County. So we gotta keep in mind that we are in a competitive environment with regard to housing. And if we wanna make all the housing look like City of Spokane, then instead of the city being a hole in the donut, the whole county will be a hole in the donut. We do not, STA does not follow development. That's just not the case. And then a great example of that is not only what happens in 5 Mile, but what's happened in Lake Valley. That development has been in place for 20 years and still has never seen a bus unless it's lost. It's a combination of a variety of different housing types, and not all housing has to have access to the same kinds of services. Otherwise, the city or SDA would be providing bus transit in Lake Tahoe Valley when clearly the density and the trip generations out of that area don't justify that. So, just trying to put a different perspective on this. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So Commissioner Friends, we're getting feedback on your speakers. So I'm gonna see if Ron has a suggestion for you.
Try turning off your speakers or lowering your speakers on your laptop. That might help. That seemed to work for Commissioner Jordan.
How is this? That any better?
A little bit, but not much.
I won't hear that.
Is that any better?
That's better. Yeah.
Okay. Well, and some of the feedback you might hear is just the echoing between the ears too.
There we go. We miss you already. Getting in the conference here today. Thank you.
No, I just say Commissioner French makes a good point. And when I was saying that STA planning generally looks at where the county's gonna grow, but it has to be enough density of growth, as Commissioner French is saying, to be supported by transit. So it's also the density of growth and where that is gonna go.
It is, and that's, in a way, what we're doing with the comp plan, you'll benefit this because we're gonna be putting before you the idea of visioning and scenario building, the idea that we should be planning and designing for building neighborhoods and not just subdivisions, just as we grow, particularly on our edges. And in working with STA, for example, they have a current project on North Division, and they're looking at including a complete streets program to that area that goes north of the city up like Mount Spokane Road. What they're doing is looking at the highlights of complete streets with their sidewalks and crossings, but it's also not taking into account that it should be building urban employment and density in the middle of that corridor. And so that's the layer we intend to bring back to STA for their own planning. If we're able to bring some of those employment centers into our urban growth areas, recognizing that this county board is going to be administering urban growth forever because cities don't annex, then some of this actually makes more sense in the unincorporated area because we'll be positioning housing closer to jobs. You know, and the West Plains is a good example of that with the explosive employment growth out there, and we're still seeing for Air Force Base, we're still seeing people living in Post Falls that have to drive through the entire metro area to get to jobs on the West Plains. And so there's that exact example of trying to put the geography of workforce housing in the right places. And and we're seeing that in our North Metro area outside of the city, in the North Mead area. Big growing areas that should be encouraged to develop employment centers, not just C-stores and retail. So there are some planning principles that we think we can pull into the 2026 comp plan that will make some of this make more sense in our hedges. But that notwithstanding, those are the parts that are more in our control. It's different on what's this going to look like for Spangle? What's it going to look like for Deer Park? What's it going to look like for Cheney? And Medical Lake, Airway Heights, Liberty Lake. They simply they can't choose to not play because that then falls on you.
Commissioner French.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I forgot something that I wanted to mention, and this is for the benefit of Commissioner Jordan. When you talk about land use policies, I'll give you a great example of policies that need to be changed to help support those higher density areas, and that's with the city line. The city of Spokane committed to FTA that it would develop TOD, or transit-oriented development regulations, to support the city line, and that was critical because the economics to support and justify the city line, $178 million of development could be possible if the city would develop the transit-oriented development regulations. That was 5 years ago, and we still haven't seen anything, and I'm not sure that we're going to see anything in the near future. But that's a great example of how land use policy needs to support the services to make density more possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to note that I think you had said to the steering committee or that maybe no other county had done a C version, but I think I heard that maybe Lewis County was looking into it. So I just didn't know if you had looked at what they had already started to propose.
Yeah, we are broadening our horizons. We heard Snohomish County was
Oh.
the first to
Oh,
start,
okay.
but for C.
Maybe we can
So we are
steal
moving.
something from them.
Absolutely.
Borrow.
Borrow.
Pay homage to our county by adopting this, but so what we would like,
Imitation, yes.
what we would like to do to follow this up is to start down that, again, what I call the visioning path or scenario building and lay out some models of what this might look like in both the A, the B, or a hybrid version for the county, the unincorporated parts, the rural parts, and then the various communities, and bring that back to you. We will be, essentially bringing this same kind of discussion to the steering committee at its July meeting. And hopefully in that iterative process, we'll be able to start something that this board can support, and we can use that as our model going forward.
So I just want to say thank you. I did attend one of the community meetings in Spokane Valley. So I'd ask for you to introduce the gentlemen that are sitting next to you because I saw them there. And I don't know that, I mean, it was interesting because it was a whole group of new people that I didn't know. And they did a great job. And we had I think it was 40 people, 40 to 50 people there, the Spokane Valley one, which is great. And the citizens there are asking these same questions. They want to know they're starting to get concerned, is the UGA not going to expand? Because they're all, sitting there with, knowing it's necessary. People want it. Some of them have properties that are in the urban reserve, so they're thinking that it's going to be opening up. So it's just interesting, hearing the questions that citizens were asking and concerned about. Which I think is important for us as the elected officials to be listening and paying attention to. So anyway, I just want to say thank you to your staff. They did a great job. There was a couple of questions that came up that I hope they didn't mind that I stood up and answered for them. Because they were more commissioner related questions. But I was kind of in the back and was trying not to do that. But couldn't help myself on a couple, so.
Tomorrow's your final presentation, right?
Correct.
Yeah, it's a kickoff.
Deer Park. And this is Bongo Thompson, Tate Andre. They're part of our long range team that this board was gracious to fund through the ARP. So that's how we're moving that forward. Very quickly on the urban growth area. By the terms of the 2013-2016 settlement agreement, we are not allowed to accept applications per se on for property owners that want to be in the urban growth areas. What we have done is simply said, send us a letter of interest and then put a map in it and we put it in the file. We have several dozen. We have quite a number of those that have expressed an interest in growing it. The challenge that we will be faced with is, unlike the last go around in 2013-2016, where essentially the rural communities, UGAs were ignored, I guess. There are somewhere between 16 to 1,800 acres of land within urban growth area boundaries that's still zoned rural. And they're left over from the very beginning of GMA when it was just a best guess. Let's just draw something around Airway Heights and call it good. All of that acreage has to be accommodated. We have to allocate that in the 2026 program. What that likely means is these small areas are going to move from having several hundred acres in urban growth area boundaries down to 10. So they're going to have urban growth areas that match their growth for the 20-year period. And the rest of that acreage will be shifted to areas that are faster growing. Whether that results in a net
acreage increase in the UGA is kind of yet to be determined, because the challenges are, yes, we've grown faster than we anticipated in the past, but with these density bonuses and density increases that communities like the county and the city have put in place, you can accommodate more growth in your boundaries than was previously done, which puts less pressure on growing past into the green field spaces. So, we want to be very careful that while the urban growth areas are going to shift and move to accommodate growth in the metro spine for sure, those growth areas are very likely going to come from the smaller communities. Those acreages will have to be repositioned. And that will keep us also in compliance with the Growth Management Act. So it's an overdue process, but it's going to change the way we do the UGA. And that process will also work its way through in the September and November meetings for the steering committee. So we'll have some better examples as we get into fall of this year of what that's going to look like.
Thank you. Nice to have both you gentlemen here, so thank you.
Thank you, commissioners. We'll see you again next time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So it has come to my attention that the letter.
We haven't
that
thrown it
was
together
sent out
yet, we'll
with
probably
budget-
throw it out, I would imagine today or tomorrow with,
Because then I can forward that to other folks.
okay, Candy, sorry.
That the budget letter that we're gonna send out, we do need to do a motion on. Jimmy Michio would like us to make.
Oh, I figured it was just gonna show up on a consent agenda.
I think they want to get it out sooner than that.
Yeah, sure.
So if I could have a motion and then I'll open up for public comment.
With the. Okay. Madam Chair, I move that we approve the drafting and signing of, just before I do, it is dated 18th, so do we want it to go out tomorrow? If I can
That's.
include that in my motion. Do we want it tomorrow? Do we want it today? Tomorrow. Okay. Madam Chair, I move that we approve the drafting and signing of a letter other than open public meeting for a budget letter to be sent to all elected officials and department heads dated June 18th regarding items regarding the drafting of our budget and other specifics as determined by the budget office to be signed by the majority of the board at other than open public meeting.
Second.
Wasn't my best motion, but we got there. Yeah. When we do everything on a consent agenda, you get rusty on things. Jeez. Oh. You know what I mean?
So I have a motion and a second for a letter, the draft budget, for a budget letter to be sent out to the department heads and their elected officials that will be signed at other than an open public meeting by the majority of the board which will be dated June 18th. Since I do have a motion and a second, and this is not an item that was on our agenda, I will open it up for public comment for anyone wishing to comment. Seeing no one here, no one online. Second call for anyone wishing to comment. Third and final call for anyone wishing to comment. Seeing no one in the conference room or no one online, I will close the open public comment and call for the vote. So all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much, and we have that now taken care of. Okay, are there any other miscellaneous items to come before the board? Immediately, Jeff.
Well, this is more kind of a fun one, at least. The GSA golf tournament.
Something fun.
Part of our, what we give to them puts us at a high level of donor, which includes a complimentary foursome at the annual golf tournament. As last year, the tournament falls on a Tuesday, which makes it a little bit challenging. It's Tuesday the 23rd, so it is a Tuesday that we have a schedule meeting and hit the summer recess, July 23rd, yes. And I believe based on emails I've seen go out, the morning tea times are taken. So it would be the afternoon tea time, which come up against the consent agenda. There's a lunch from 1 to 2:30, and then tea times, the morning tea times end before the lunch, the afternoon tea times start up.
The delayed
At that point, so they would like to know by tomorrow if we're doing it or not. We can get names to them later. So if it works for the commissioners, great. If it doesn't work for the commissioners, we can find other people to do it. So I guess question one, do we definitely say yes, we're gonna use a foursome? And then question two, who are said four people? Last year, Ashley Callan put a group together for us because it didn't work for any of the commissioners or other separately electeds that I reached out to. And so Ashley pulled together 4 staff from around the county who are able to utilize.
So we definitely should do it.
Yeah, don't let it.
Yeah.
Don't let us miss out on it, but yeah, no, we can, I mean, always send staff, it doesn't fit our schedules.
But if it's after, if the lunch is till 2:30 and the next tea times aren't later.
Those tea times are probably like 3, probably, right?
I don't have that, but that would make sense.
Do you know what golf course it's at? How far from here?
again?
Oh, up at one. Okay.
So good. A couple of commissioners can zoom in. If need be.
The overall says from 7 to 5. So I wouldn't think the tea times are going super late if you're actually done by 5.
There's no way
I
you
think
finish
it's
a round of 18 and by 5 if you're starting after 2.
That's
I
what
think
it
it's a shotgun start.
is. It is a shotgun start.
You're
and it's
starting
best
at
of all.
one time. Yeah.
Okay,
Maybe they got
But if-
boosters on their carts.
but if you're starting at 3, you're not done by 5 unless you're only playing 9 holes.
I'd still be looking for my ball on the 3rd. So.
So I would say we definitely want to put in for the foursome
Okay.
and we can figure out the rest of it. I mean, maybe get more details as to.
I will find out tea times. Any other thing I need to find out?
That's about it.
I think that's it, and then we can figure it out from there.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Any other miscellaneous items? To you guys.
I know I was contacted last Friday about an executive session for today. I don't know though those participants are actually in the rooms. Maybe that's being delayed.
Don't know what time it was.
I'll follow up on that, 'cause I
Yeah.
don't see anybody here for it.
Commissioner French.
Yeah, there was discussion about having a pending potential litigation session this morning and related, well, I don't, obviously without the folks in the room, it related to, oh shoot, I can't even talk about what it related to. But you're right, the participants are not in the room, so evidently we're gonna try and move this to tomorrow. But it is time sensitive, so I can't share with you that.
So then it sounded like you had a potential litigation.
Yep.
that People that you wanted to have in the room are not in the room, so we will delay that until tomorrow.
Yep,
Okay. Tomorrow
thank
morning,
you.
hopefully,
Yeah, hopefully.
although we're supposed to, I think we have a hard stop for you at 11.
Commissioner Jordan, I think we have a hard stop tomorrow. Is it like 11? 11, little after 11?
Shortly after 11.
Yeah, 11:10 or something like that.
Okay, good. Okay,
What are you guys going to?
we'll try to.
Oh, a luncheon.
Similar to what we had last.
Oh, got it.
Yes.
Understood.
So anyway, with that, then, are there any other items to come before the board this morning? Okay, then we will adjourn for the morning, this meeting, and we'll see everybody back tomorrow, like 9 o'clock.